This episode contains stories of trauma related to sexual, physical, and emotional abuse, codependency, and addiction. If you or someone you know is struggling or in crisis, help is available. Call or text 988 or chat 988lifeline.org. Welcome to It's Your Story to Tell. I'm here with my podcast producer and friend, Kelsey Vaughn, and she's going to help me to share my story with you. The purpose of this podcast is to inspire and bring hope to people who have experienced hard, traumatic things that are holding them back and preventing them from living the life that they truly desired. So bear with me today as I am sharing my story with you and how I went from being in a place that was stuck to creating and living the life that I desire, and now really being able to give back to others in hopes that they're going to find freedom and becoming all that they want to be. So thanks for joining me, Kelsey.
Oh gosh, thank you so much for having me or inviting me. It's interesting, since normally I'm on the other side of the camera, and now I'm getting a little payback. I get to be on the side of the camera. But
Exactly. All those times when you're telling me smile and look normal, now it's your turn.
Yeah. No, I'm really honored to be here with you and to be a part of your first podcast episode and get to introduce you and to help everybody, know your story. And I just know in the time that I've known you and gotten to know you, honestly, so I know we saw that post the other day that said, tell your friends how much you love them and make it awkward. And I love that. But I really you've become a very important part of our circle and our family, and have gotten close with Emmeline, my daughter, and my husband just really appreciates you. And anyways, I'm going off on a tangent, but yeah, no, I know your heart, and I know how much you want to help others, and I know how much you're going to be able to help others. And I know that we just have to, get your story out there. Okay, so I guess first question, I know a little bit about this, but I know everybody else wants to know about this, is have you always known that you want to be a helper and, help people have better lives?
Yeah.
When did that start?
So I think that as far back as I can remember, I wanted to help people. And I know that it's documented in my baby book from a young age. My mom asked me, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I was about 5, and I answered a nice nurse. And here I am, 20 years of being a nurse. And while I'm been in many different roles throughout those years, it's always been about helping people. And I had to learn how to help people, because we'll talk a little bit more about my story, but I really didn't know how to do it in a way that wasn't hurtful to myself. And so throughout the years, I spent a lot of energy and giving in areas that maybe weren't so helpful. So I look forward to talking about kind of how that transformed. But yeah, I've always wanted to be a helper. And I think that from where I'm at now and the journey that I've been on in my own recovery from codependency, I am so much more well-suited to help people in a way that is honoring to myself and my family, and also to them, because you can't help people who don't want to help themselves. And so I have a lot more discretion now on where I use that gift. So yeah, I've always wanted to help people, and I have a heart for people. And that's why I want to share my story, because I spent a lot of years feeling alone and stuck and not knowing how to move forward, and ashamed and not wanting to really be honest. And I just want to create a place where people can talk about the hard things and not be judged, and find true love, support, and connection.
Oh, that's amazing. I've been wondering, I feel like we've talked about this a little bit before, but wondering, is there anybody in your childhood that, kind of inspired you to want to be that nice nurse, or was this just, your inner instinct, like, this is what I want to do? Like, was there...
That's a fun question. And when you were asking that, I was thinking about a memory when I was really young, and I had some sort of allergic reaction, and I broke out in hives, and I was having trouble breathing. And so my mom took me into the doctors, and they gave me shots, probably Benadryl or a steroid, something to help with the allergic reaction. But I didn't feel like the nurse was very nice. In fact, I was kind of resistant to this nurse, and fighting back against the shot. And I think I said some things, and I really embarrassed my mom because I needed to have blood work done. And she was like, I will not be taking her. They wouldn't do it in the office. And my dad had to come from work, pick me up, and he took me to get my blood work, and he was so good with me, of like helping to calm me, because I was really afraid. This nurse was like coming out with me with needles and not really telling me.
How old were you? Do you remember?
No, I think I was probably around the same age as I said I wanted to be a nice nurse, probably 5, 6. And my dad actually had me do Lamaze breathing.
Oh, wow. That's impressive that he
just like help calm my nervous system. And I was able to get my blood drawn. And I thought, I don't want other people to experience like that traumatic. So I think it was kind of a mix between this nurse being not very nice, and then seeing how my dad was able to come along and like calm me so that I could do something that I needed to do for my health. That inspired me to want to be a nice nurse.
Oh, well, that's a great story of something hard where something good came out of it.
So true, right? Like that's the thing that we have to recognize, is that so much good can come out of the hard things. And while I've had a lot of hard things, I know that God makes all things good if you allow it. And he's been so faithful. And I'm here today because of him continuing to work in me and bringing people alongside of me that helped me, that allowed me to work through things. And that's what I get to do for others. And it's so cool when it kind of comes full circle.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit more about your faith and how that's, played a role and shaped where you are now?
Yeah. So I grew up in a family that was a 2-parent home. My mom stayed at home with us. We were either homeschooled or private school for the majority of our life. I did go to public school for 2 years in high school in a medical magnet program. But faith was always very central in our lives. We went to church Sunday night, Wednesday night, and I always remember loving Jesus. And my mom actually led me to the Lord when I was young, probably in the 6-year-old range. But over the years, I wasn't always living a life that was what the Bible says or God tells us in order to protect us. I think that for a long time, I saw so many like rules, and I just didn't feel a lot of love when it came to the church, or the way in some ways it was presented. I remember a memory from youth group where they showed a video of people dying in a car crash, and the ones who didn't know Jesus and the ones who did, and like the scariness of hell. And like, I just didn't really feel very connected to that. Wow. It felt really fearful. And I think for a long time, I struggled because I just was like, I don't think that's like what Jesus is. And because of things that had happened in my life that were really traumatic, that caused me to have really poor coping mechanisms and behaviors that were hurting me, I felt a lot of shame, and I didn't feel really safe in my relationships with people in my family or within the church to go to them and ask for help, because I felt, gosh, I'm so outside the bounds and lines of what a good Christian is, that I didn't want to expose myself. I wanted to make my family proud, and I felt if I was honest with what I was going through, that would be look negative on them and negative maybe on God. And so I just kept it to myself, which was the worst thing that you can do when you go through hard things, is try to manage it on your own and try to keep it hidden.
So when they showed you the video, the car accident, did you ask any questions or kind of push back on that at all? I'm just curious to know how that went. Like, did you ever find yourself, I'll give you a little back story for myself. Like I always felt like growing up in church, I was the one who asked too many questions, and it wasn't always super welcomed. In fact, at one point I had been asking some questions purely out of curiosity, and I was told that, I was, not acting like a Christian. And so, I, in my own story, like I've struggled with some, church trauma, I guess. Yeah. And so I was just curious if you ever found yourself in a similar place where, maybe you were asking questions, and, if that was ever met with, any judgments or resistance.
So I was really wanting to be seen as the way I thought I should show up. So I didn't ask a lot of questions. I just sat in fear of like, oh my God, I don't want to burn in hell. Like, that's so awful. There's like people screaming, and it's just so scary. And I think I would, I probably asked Jesus to come into my heart again, because I was like, well, I got to make sure I'm saved. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't out of a heart to know Jesus or to be connected. It was out of fear. And I think for me, fear has really been a theme in my life, and running from fear. And when I have and haven't asked the questions and haven't been curious, which curiosity is one of my essential parts of my coaching with people, because I do think that you have to ask a lot of questions. You shouldn't just accept things blindly when people tell you things or in your own life, And so in order to get to the root or to have understanding, I think you need to ask a lot of questions. And I really struggled with that in my own personal relationship with the Lord for a long time. And it was only as I was in my own recovery, and I was in a group of women, and we were going through a book on healing from sexual abuse, because sexual abuse is part of my story. There were things that were inappropriately done to me at a young age, and that led me to be in places that put me in very unhealthy relationships and continual exposure to more and more trauma, and a rape in high school. And a lot of my inability to go and ask for help was out of fear of not being a good Christian, or being thought of poorly, or I wasn't in the right place, or, God says you shouldn't have sex before marriage, and here I am, like I'll never have a good husband. So trauma creates beliefs and narratives that, when you're not aware of them, they just dictate your life. Like what you think and believe becomes the life that you live. And I remember, as I had started the process of confronting some of those things, vulnerability, like me being here for this podcast and sharing this, is not something I ever thought I would do. It's something that I even struggle with today, because there is still that fear that will come up, that people will judge you, they won't love you, you won't have good relationships. And I have to speak truth to myself. But I remember coming home from one of those meetings, and it was where I first started learning about the power of sharing your story and letting others be there with you. The other part of my coaching, I think that's so important, is community. And because trauma happens in relationship, and so it has to be healed there, and being able to share your story and seeing people not judge me and love me and feel sad for me. I mean, I didn't even know how to have compassion for myself, which is the third key in my coaching, is compassion for yourself and for others, because hurt people. And I remember driving home from that meeting, and I was hoping that my marriage would be saved, and I had been praying for it. And I was really mad at God, because I remembered the scripture that I will not say it exactly, so this is my paraphrase, but where that when you pray for things that are in line with his will, that he's going to give them to you. And I'm like, I am praying for my marriage, and I want it to be saved, and I feel like I'm doing all the right things, and it's not happening. And I had never been honest with God about being angry, and because I thought that is so disrespectful, and you should just, forgive 70 times 7, just keep going, keep, praising the Lord and believing, and it'll happen. And I just finally said out loud how angry I was, and like, why are you not giving this to me? And almost audibly, I heard him say, because I am not an abuser. Likely you are listening to this podcast because you have your own story, and you're either struggling, stuck, or maybe you've even made your way through it. And I'd love to hear from you. So reach out. I'm always looking for people who can share and be on my podcast. But also, I would ask you if you know somebody who's struggling, who could use the encouragement, that you would share this podcast with them, follow along on my social media so that you can share resources with people in your life that could benefit. Thanks so much for coming along on my journey. I can't wait to share the stories to come. This podcast is intended only for educational, inspirational, and entertainment purposes. The purpose of this podcast is not to replace the counsel of a physician, professional coach, psychotherapist, or other qualified professional. If you or someone you know is struggling or in crisis, help is available. Call or text 988 or chat 988lifeline.org. New podcasts every Friday. Listen and subscribe wherever you like to listen to podcasts. If you're ready to start your own transformation journey, visit meganbabcock.com.